Lord of the FLIs by William Golding detailed Samurai Part 1. The Crash and First Attempts at Civilization Chapters 1-2. The novel opens with Ralph emerging from a tropical jungle onto a beach, having survived a plane crash during what appears to be a wartime evacuation of British schoolboys. The exact nature of the war remains deliberately vague, but references to the bomb and atomic warfare establish a post-apocalyptic context. Ralph, approximately 12 years old, represents the archetypal fair-haired English boy, confident, athletic, and naturally charismatic. Ralph discovers a large conch shell on the beach and, following the suggestion of an overweight, asthmatic boy nicknamed Piggy, uses it to summon the other survivors. The conch's deep, resonant call draws boys from across the island, revealing the scope of the disaster. No adults have survived, leaving the children completely alone on this uninhabited tropical island. As the boys gather, their individual personalities begin to emerge. Piggy, whose real name is never revealed, serves as Ralph's advisor despite being marginalized by the other boys due to his physical appearance, lower class background, and asthma. His glasses become immediately important as the only means of making fire on the island. Jack Merridew arrives leading a choir of boys dressed in black cloaks, already demonstrating his authoritarian tendencies and comfort with commanding others. The democratic impulse emerges naturally among the boys as they recognize the need for leadership and organization. Ralph is elected chief in a simple vote, narrowly defeating Jack, though Ralph attempts to mollify Jack by putting him in charge of the choir, which becomes the island's hunting party. This early political compromise contains the seeds of future conflict between Ralph's democratic leadership style and Jack's authoritarian instincts. The boys' first priority is rescue, and Ralph organizes the construction of a signal fire on the island's mountain peak. The fire represents their connection to civilization and their hope of return to the adult world. However, their first attempt at fire-making nearly results in disaster when the flames spread out of control, possibly killing a small boy with a birthmark on his face, the first hint of the violence that will eventually consume their society. During these early days, the boys attempt to establish rules and maintain some semblance of the civilization they left behind. The conch becomes a symbol of democratic order. Whoever holds it has the right to speak at assemblies. Ralph establishes priorities, maintaining the signal fire, building shelters, and ensuring a supply of fresh water. These practical concerns reflect the rational, civilized approach to their situation. However, even in these early chapters, signs of civilization's fragility appear. The smaller boys, called Littlands, are plagued by nightmares about a beastie or monster they believe inhabits the island. These fears, dismissed by the older boys as childish fantasy, represent the psychological terror that will eventually overwhelm their rational attempts at self-governance. Part 2. The Beast Within. In the first cracks chapters 3-4 as days pass on the island, the initial enthusiasm for civilization begins to wane, and the boys' true natures start to emerge. Jack becomes increasingly obsessed with hunting, spending his days tracking the wild pigs that roam the island. His face painted with clay and charcoal for camouflage, Jack begins to lose himself in the primitive thrill of the hunt, representing humanity's regression towards savagery when removed from social constraints. Ralph struggles to maintain focus on rescue and civilization. He works tirelessly to build shelters, often alone or with only Simon's help, while most boys abandon their responsibilities to play or hunt. The shelters represent more than mere practical necessity. They symbolize the human impulse to create order and security, to impose civilization upon nature. Ralph's frustration grows as he realizes that maintaining civilization requires constant effort and cooperation that many boys are unwilling to provide. Simon emerges as a unique figure among the boys, mystical, intuitive, and naturally good. Unlike the others, he helps with practical work without being asked and shows kindness to the younger children. Simon has a secret place in the jungle where he goes to think and observe nature, suggesting a spiritual connection to the island that the other boys lack. His character represents the possibility of inherent human goodness, contrasting with the novel's darker themes. The Littlands develop their own separate society, largely ignored by the older boys except when their labor is needed. They spend their days playing on the beach, eating fruit, and suffering from chronic diarrhea and nightmares. Their talk of the beastie becomes more persistent and detailed, describing a creature that comes from the sea at night. These fears, while dismissed by the older boys, reflect genuine psychological terror and foreshadow the real beast that will emerge human nature itself. A crucial incident occurs when Jack allows the signal fire to die while hunting. A ship passes the island during this time, potentially missing their rescue opportunity because no smoke signal was visible. Ralph's anger at this failure leads to the first serious confrontation between him and Jack, highlighting their fundamentally different priorities and approaches to leadership. Jack represents immediate gratification and excitement, while Ralph embodies long-term thinking and responsibility. The tension escalates when Jack's hunters finally succeed in killing a pig. Their excitement is disturbing in its intensity. They reenact the kill obsessively, with one boy playing the pig while others pretend to attack him. This ritualistic behavior suggests that hunting has become more than mere survival. It has awakened something primitive and violent in their nature. The chant, "Kill the pig, cut her throat, bash her in," becomes their war cry, marking their psychological transformation from civilized children to savage hunters. Piggy's glasses are broken during a fight between Ralph and Jack, damaging the boy's ability to make fire and symbolically representing the destruction of clear vision and rational thought. This incident foreshadows greater violence to come and demonstrates how quickly civilized behavior can deteriorate when authority is challenged and resources become scarce. Part 3. The Death of Reason and the Rise of Savagery. Chapters 5-8. Ralph calls an assembly to address the growing chaos and the boys' failure to maintain their agreed-upon responsibilities. His speech reveals his growing maturity and understanding of their situation's gravity, but also his frustration with the others' immaturity. He attempts to re-establish rules and priorities, emphasizing the critical importance of the signal fire and proper sanitation, but his words fall on increasingly deaf ears. The assembly degenerates as fear dominates rational discussion. The boys' terror of the beast becomes overwhelming, with various sightings and theories proposed. One Littlum claims to have seen a beast from the sea, while others describe different manifestations. The beast becomes a catch-all for their deepest fears and anxieties, representing not just physical danger but psychological terror of the unknown and uncontrollable. Jack exploits these fears for his own political purposes, positioning himself as the strong leader who can protect the boys from the beast through hunting and violence. He challenges Ralph's authority directly, questioning his leadership and suggesting that Ralph is a coward who cannot protect them. When Jack fails to win support for removing Ralph as chief, he dramatically leaves the assembly, inviting others to join him in forming a new tribe focused on hunting and fun rather than rescue and civilization. Simon attempts to speak rationally about the beast, suggesting that maybe it's only us a profound insight that the real beast is human nature itself, the capacity for evil that exists within each person. However, his philosophical observation is drowned out by the others' emotional reactions and fear-driven responses. Simon's wisdom is consistently ignored throughout the novel, representing society's tendency to reject difficult truths in favor of comfortable illusions. Meanwhile, the adult world's war continues, and a battle occurs in the sky above the island. A dead parachutist lands on the mountain where the signal fire burns, creating a terrifying figure that moves in the wind. When Sam and Eric, the twins called Samnarig, see this figure at dawn, they mistake it for the beast, providing apparent confirmation of the monster's existence. This beast from air represents the adult world's own savagery and moral corruption, ironically validated the boys' fears while demonstrating that civilization itself is no protection against human evil. Jack's breakaway tribe grows as boys are attracted by the promise of hunting, meat, and freedom from Ralph's rules and responsibilities. They establish their camp at Castle Rock, a natural fortress at one end of the island, and adopt increasingly savage behaviors. Their faces painted and their hair grown long. They begin to resemble the primitive tribes they might have read about in adventure stories, but their transformation is real and terrifying. The Lord of the F-Allies makes its first appearance when Jack's tribe kills another pig and impales its head on a stick as an offering to the beast. This grotesque totem, covered with F-Allies and rotting in the tropical heat, becomes a powerful symbol of the evil that has been unleashed on the island. The pig's head seems to grin with malevolent knowledge, representing the corruption of innocence and the triumph of savagery over civilization. Part 4. Confrontation with Evil and the Murder of Truth. Chapters 8-9. Deep in the tropical jungle, Simon sits alone before a horrifying sight: a pig's head impaled on a wooden stake, its eyes crawling with black F-Allies.
The severed head grins grotesquely in the dappled sunlight filtering through the dense green canopy.
Simon, a thin boy with dark hair, trembles as he stares at this grisly totem, experiencing what appears to be a seizure-induced hallucination where the rotting head seems to speak to him.
The pig skull, now known as the Lord of the FLIs, reveals a terrible truth through Simon's fevered mind. The beast the boys fear is not a creature lurking in the jungle shadows, but the darkness that lives within each human heart. This grotesque oracle warns Simon that evil cannot be destroyed because it exists within every person, making the boys' hunt for an external monster ultimately futile.
Despite this ominous warning, Simon climbs the steep mountain path to investigate the mysterious beast from air.
At the summit, he discovers a horrifying figure, a dead pilot still attached to his parachute, the corpse swaying grotesquely in the wind against the night sky. With gentle hands, Simon untangles the parachute lines, allowing the harmless remains to blow away into the darkness, demonstrating his courage and rational thinking. Meanwhile, at the far end of the island, near the rocky cliffs, Jack's savage tribe has established their fortress-like camp. The boys' faces are streaked with red and white clay or paint, their hair grown wild and matted. They carry sharpened wooden spears and move with the predatory grace of primitive hunters.
These painted warriors bear little resemblance to the proper British schoolboys they once were, their transformation both physical and psychological.
Ralph and Piggy, now isolated and hungry, make their way through the jungle toward Jack's camp where smoke rises from cooking fires.
The scent of roasted meat draws them to a clearing where Jack's tribe has prepared a great feast. Firelit faces dance in the flickering orange light as the tribal boys chant and move in rhythmic circles around the flames. As night falls and storm clouds gather overhead, the tribal dance becomes increasingly frenzied.
Lightning flashes illuminate the painted faces of boys caught in collective hysteria, their voices rising in the chant, "Kill the beast,
Cut his throat, spill his blood."
The driving rain turns the sandy clearing into mud as the boys leap and writhe in their primitive war dance. Into this scene of chaos emerges Simon from the dark jungle, stumbling forward with urgent news about the harmless nature of their feared beast. But the rain blinded. Frenzied boys see only a dark figure approaching through the storm.
Mistaking gentle Simon for the monster they fear, the mob falls upon him with sticks and bare hands, their civilized restraints completely abandoned to primitive violence.
The tragic scene ends with Simon's lifeless body being carried away by the incoming tide. In the water, his form is surrounded by glowing phosphorescent sea creatures that create an almost angelic halo of light around the murdered boy, a beautiful, ethereal image that contrasts starkly with the brutal violence that preceded it.
The ocean gently bears away the one person who understood the truth about their situation.
Part 5. The complete breakdown of Civilization chapters 10-11. The morning after Simon's murder brings a horrifying return to reality. Ralph and Piggy struggle to process what happened, with Piggy desperately trying to rationalize the killing as an accident or a case of mistaken identity.
Their psychological defense mechanisms reveal how difficult it is to accept participation in evil, even when the evidence is undeniable.
Ralph, however, is more honest about their guilt, recognizing that they participated in murder. Jack's tribe, meanwhile, shows no remorse. They have crossed a psychological threshold and embraced their savage nature completely. Jack declares himself the chief of the entire island and leads a raid on Ralph's camp to steal Piggy's glasses, the symbol of intellectual power and the practical means of making fire. This theft represents the final triumph of force over reason, of savagery over civilization. The raid traumatizes Ralph's remaining followers.
Sam and Eric are beaten, and the theft of the glasses leaves Ralph's group helpless and blind.
Piggy, nearly blind without his spectacles, becomes even more vulnerable and dependent on the others.
The assault demonstrates that Jack's tribe has abandoned all pretense of civilized behavior and is willing to use violence to achieve their goals.
Ralph decides to confront Jack directly, leading his small band of followers to Castle Rock to demand the return of Piggy's glasses. This decision represents both courage and desperation. Ralph knows he has little power left, but his moral conviction compels him to make one final stand for civilization and justice. The confrontation at Castle Rock reveals how completely the boys have been transformed. Jack's tribe has become a primitive warrior society, complete with war paint, spears, and a fortress mentality. They have taken Sam and Eric prisoner and tortured them into joining their tribe, demonstrating their willingness to use violence against their former friends. Ralph's attempt to reason with Jack fails completely. Jack has moved beyond rational argument to pure authoritarianism, ruling through fear and violence.
When Ralph tries to remind the boys of their original purpose, rescue and return to civilization, Jack's only response is violence.
The confrontation escalates when Roger, one of Jack's most sadistic followers, deliberately releases a boulder that crushes Piggy and destroys the conch shell.
Piggy's death represents the murder of intellect, reason, and civilization itself. His final words are a desperate plea for rationality and moral behavior. They are cut short by the boulder that kills him instantly.
The simultaneous destruction of the conch, the symbol of democratic order and civilized discourse, marks the complete collapse of any pretense of civilization on the island.
With Piggy dead and the conch destroyed, Ralph finds himself completely alone against Jack's savage tribe.
The boys who once elected him leader now hunt him like an animal, demonstrating how quickly democratic institutions can collapse when faced with organized violence and intimidation. Part 6. The Hunt and the Return of the Adult World, Chapter 12.
The final chapter opens with Ralph hiding in the jungle, now the hunted rather than the hunter. Jack's tribe has devolved into a completely savage society, and they pursue Ralph with the same enthusiasm and ritualistic fervor they once reserved for pigs.
The role reversal is complete. The former symbol of civilization has become prey for those who have embraced their animal nature. Ralph's night alone in the jungle represents his final loss of innocence.
He can no longer deny the reality of human evil or maintain faith in the inherent goodness of people.
His encounter with the Lord of the FLIs, now just a skull picked clean by FLIs and ants, forces him to confront the same truth that Simon discovered. The beast is within human nature itself.
The hunt for Ralph becomes increasingly desperate and methodical.
Jack's tribe uses sophisticated tactics, setting the island's forest on fire to smoke Ralph out of hiding. This act of environmental destruction represents the final abandonment of any concern for the future. They are willing to destroy their entire world to satisfy their immediate bloodlust.
Sam and Eric, now forced members of Jack's tribe, warn Ralph of the planned hunt but reveal that they too have been corrupted by fear and violence. Their betrayal of Ralph's hiding place demonstrates how totalitarian systems turn people against their former friends and principles through intimidation and terror.
As the fire spreads across the island, destroying the paradise that once seemed to offer hope of civilized life, Ralph runs for his life through the burning jungle. The symbolism is clear. The boy's savagery has literally consumed their world, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. Ralph's final flight brings him to the beach where the novel began, completing the circular structure of the narrative.
Just as he reaches exhaustion and seems certain to be captured and killed by his pursuers, a British naval officer appears on the beach, drawn by the smoke of the forest fire.
The officer's arrival represents the return of adult authority and civilization, but it also reveals the irony of the boy's situation.
The officer is himself part of a world at war, engaged in the same kind of organized violence that the boys have discovered within themselves. His crisp uniform and military bearing represent order and civilization, but they also represent the institutionalized violence of the adult world.
The officer's reaction to the boy's appearance and behavior is one of disappointment rather than horror. He expected better from British boys, revealing the cultural assumptions about civilization and superiority that the novel systematically dismantles.
His comment that he expected the boys to put up a better show demonstrates his failure to understand what has really happened on the island.
Ralph stares at the novel's end after multiple losses, the end of innocence, the death of his friends, and the recognition of human evil. The other boys, faced with adult authority, begin to remember their former selves and feel shame for their actions, but this return to civilization feels fragile and temporary. The novel ends with the ambiguous return to a world that may be no more civilized than the island society the boys created and destroyed. Love this summary? Hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more book wisdom. Let me know what book to cover next in the comments.